It's soup season, and I've got 4 more magical bags that will come to the rescue again and again. You won't believe soups like these could come from a bag on your pantry shelf. Hey guys, it's Jara with The Kid Prepared. Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to all our new subscribers. Today I'm sharing 4 new emergency meal kits, otherwise known as meals in a bag. These bags contain everything you need to make a complete meal, right down to and including any water and seasonings that you need. Just grab a bag off the shelf and have a delicious meal ready in no time. And believe me when I say these meals are a million times better than your typical survival or convenience meals. They're great for emergencies and power outages, but they're equally as good for camping trips and hectic days and for blessing others. The first recipe I'm making today is an old family favorite of ours that's got some really special meaning to us. It's a creamy chicken and wild rice soup that is so delicious. Everyone loves this soup. A few simple swaps and it became a shelf-stable meal in a bag that can be done from start to finish within a half an hour or so. Let's get started. For this recipe, I'm starting with a box of rice-a-roni long grain and wild rice mix. Now, the reason the brand is important is because the different brands are different sizes. I actually found that out the hard way when I used an Uncle Ben's brand once, and I didn't realize that. So I ended up with something that wasn't really a soup because there was too much rice and it absorbed too much liquid. So use the rice-a-roni brand if you can find it. And then I've got a box of, this is a 32-ounce box of chicken broth. I have got a can of peas and carrots here. Now, the original recipe called for celery and carrots, which I really, really like. So if you wanted, you could substitute something like a freeze-dried mirepoix like this. I sometimes will do this. This has celery, carrots, and onions. And you could just put, 1 to 2 cups into a mason jar and put it in with your recipe instead of the peas and carrots. I've also got a can of media crema here. This is basically like a light or heavy cream. It's a thick, heavy cream product that's canned, which is a really, really great item to have in your pantry. And it works great for creamy soups like this. I've got a can of Keystone chicken here. This is the large can. So it's a 28-ounce can. This is really, really good chicken. This is going to be great in the soup. I've got a packet of Pioneer Country gravy here. Once again, the brand can make a difference. This packet makes 2 cups of gravy. So look for a packet that makes 2 cups if you use a different brand. And I've also got a 16.9-ounce bottle of water here. And that's all we need to make this meal. Now let's go ahead and get it into the bag. I'm going to start with the can of chicken, and next the box of broth, the can of peas and carrots, the can of media crema, the bottle of water, the box of rice mix, and the packet of country gravy mix. And now our bag is all ready to go on the shelf. But today I'm not putting these on the shelf. I'm going to cook them up and show you how they come out. All right, I've got my soup pot here, and I'm going to start off by adding the chicken. Now, Keystone meats are really fantastic. You can see the only ingredients here are chicken and sea salt, product of the USA. So this is a great item to have in your prepper pantry. If you can find them at Walmart, they're actually pretty inexpensive. You can order them from their site, but then you have to pay shipping. So I like to find them at Walmart. Even when my store didn't carry them, I was able to order them through Walmart online and not have to pay the shipping. So I'll put links down below if you want to check out the Keystone meats. Now you can see it's just the meat and the fat that came from the meat and the natural juices that came off the chicken when it was cooking. So you can skim that fat off or otherwise remove it. Sometimes it's more solid than this. It just depends on the product. But you can take off as much or as little of that fat as you want. And then sometimes you can also use that to saute if you had a part of your recipe that needed to be sauteed. I'm not going to get that fancy today. I'm just going to do a dump and cook because in an emergency, we want easy. Same on busy nights when we're turning to meals like this. So I'm just going to remove a little bit of this fat. I'm going to leave the broth and juice in there and then get it in my pan. All right. Oops. All right. I've removed some of the fat, and you can feel free to also leave as much of that fat as you want. It's really personal preference. It'll add some flavor and richness to the soup. And in an emergency, keep in mind, you really don't want to waste anything, and you could probably use the extra calories. So I would definitely leave it in that case. I'm just going to break this chicken apart a little bit. That's all we really need to do. Next, I'm going to add my rice. I'm adding everything, the rice with the seasoning mix. Next, I'm going to add my can of peas and carrots. And I'm not going to drain this because this little bit of extra water will actually just add more broth and flavoring to our soup. And You don't want to waste any water if it's an emergency. Now I'm going to add my box of chicken broth, the whole thing, which is about 4 cups. Give that a stir. And next I'm going to add most of my water, but I'm going to leave about 1/2 cup of this behind because I'm going to need that to blend my gravy mix with before I add that towards the end. So I'm going to dump probably about 2/3 to 3/4 of that water in there. Now I'm just going to get this on the heat. I can put it on pretty high heat because I really just want to get it up to a simmer as quickly as I can. And at that point, I'm going to turn it down, cover it, and let it simmer until the rice is tender. You can break up any bigger pieces of chicken as you go if it looks like it needs it. They will break up somewhat on their own as the soup is cooking and being stirred. In the original recipe, it's chicken breasts that are cooked in the soup as the soup cooks, and then they're shredded at the end. So it can be done similarly with this. That lid on so we can keep that heat in and not waste our fuel. All right, now you can see it is starting to come to a simmer. I don't really need to get it to a hard boil because I just want to keep it at a simmer. So now that it's simmering, I'm going to go ahead and lower the heat. I'm going to keep the cover on. I'm going to let this go for about 25 minutes until the rice is tender and thickened up. And I'll see you back when that's done. Now, while this is finishing up its simmer, you can see that that rice is starting to absorb some of that liquid and be somewhat cooked. It's almost done simmering. So right now I am going to, I don't know if you could see that because it was covered up with steam. While that's finishing up its simmer, I'm going to go ahead and mix up this country gravy mix that we need to have ready to go in. So I'm going to go ahead and add that into this bowl with the rest of this bottle of water, which is about 1/2 cup, and just whisk this together till it's all blended. Got all kinds of little bits of pepper in here, so that's really good. It's going to add some seasoning, extra seasoning to our soup that we didn't have to add ourselves. All right, that's ready to go. And then I'm also going to get this media crema ready to go, which really, it's got a pop top, so that's not going to be an issue. Always make sure you have a manual can opener in your emergency gear, and you can always throw some military can openers into your individual bags if you are worried about not having a can opener. All right, I've got my favorite can scraping spatula here. Normally when I make this recipe, I do it in the crock pot, and you could certainly do it in the crock pot if you're doing this just for an everyday meal. All of this part goes in the crock pot, and then the remaining ingredients go right at the very end and cook for, the remaining 20 minutes in the crock pot. And you probably could use a crock pot in an emergency if the power was out, if you have a solar power station, because I have seen people who use their crock pot on their power station when they're having a long-term power outage to keep like hot water available for dishes, for hot cocoa, for things like that. They'll keep a crock pot of water going on their power station because they have a low power draw. So I thought that was something interesting to remember. All right, now that the 25 minutes is up, you can see this has thickened up a lot. You can see how much that rice has cooked. So now I'm going to go ahead and add in these other ingredients. I'm putting the heat up just a little bit because I'm going to be adding the room temperature ingredients, and I want to make sure that this is going to thicken. This is our gravy mix here, so I'm going to go ahead and pour this in and just give it a stir. We want this to cook a little bit to be able to thicken, so we want this to simmer. And then the final thing I'm adding is my can of media crema. Now this is very thick, but it will melt right into the hot soup. It's getting all nice and thick and creamy. All right, I'm just going to let this continue to simmer and stir it until I see that basically by the time all of that media crema has completely melted in and incorporated, this is going to be done because I can feel that that gravy mix has thickened it up. If you see any clumps of the media crema, you can just go ahead and give it a little bit of help against the side of the pot. All right, I think that's good. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. If there are any tiny little clumps of the media crema, they are going to continue to melt in. I'm going to let this cool for a few minutes because it's piping hot. And as it cools, any remaining clumps will melt in. And then we will be ready to serve our soup. All right, it has been sitting for 10 minutes, so the soup has cooled off a little bit. It's still nice and hot, and look at how beautiful and hearty this is. I'm going to serve up a bowl. And give it a try. That is so good. It's hearty enough that it's going to fill you up. It's simple enough that it's going to be kid-friendly. My kids love this soup, and it is delicious, warm, and comforting. All of the soups that I'm sharing today can completely stand alone as a meal. They're very hearty and filling, and they all contain protein, carbs, and some vegetables. So they're fairly nutritionally complete. But sometimes we just want a little something extra with our soup. If you happen to have some crusty bread on hand, that's a great thing to serve with these soups. You can also include a bag of oyster crackers in the bag with your ingredients. Just make sure that you rotate things like those crackers out every so often so they don't get stale. I'm also going to show you another option, a simple way to make some really easy drop biscuits with pancake mix and a few other simple ingredients. These are kind of like the Red Lobster Cheddar Bay biscuits that are so good. I wanted these to be something I could indulge in too, so I'm using my favorite pancake mix for these. This pancake mix is gluten-free if you have to be gluten-free, which I don't, but it's also low carb, high protein, and high fiber, so it fits into the way that I need to eat. I get it from one of my favorite online wellness stores that I'm a member of, and I was so happy when they came out with this pancake mix because I can finally eat pancakes again. I love it as pancakes, so I thought I would try it in this biscuit recipe. We thought they came out pretty darn good, so I'm going to show you how I did it. I'm using a wide mouth pint jar to contain all of this, and I'm going to start with the pancake mix. I'm using 1 cup of the pancake mix. I'm going to use a funnel to make sure that all of this mix gets into the jar. So there's my 1 cup of mix in the jar. I'm also adding some butter powder, a tablespoon of butter powder, and some instant milk powder. I'm also adding a tablespoon of the instant milk powder. Now this is an instant milk powder that uses 3 tablespoons of powder for 1 cup of milk. So try to look for that when you're picking out your instant milk powder. I am, of course, going to have sources for where I get everything I use down below in case you're having trouble finding anything. I'm also adding a 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Might go a little bit scant on the salt, but not too scant. You want these to have some salty flavor. And then I'm doing about a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. Now I'm going to put a little baggie into the top of the bag. This is just a fold top sandwich bag. I don't want a zipper on it. That's going to be too much bulk in here. And if I use an oxygen absorber for long-term storage, I want the oxygen absorber to be able to react with the contents of the bag as well. Into here, I'm going to be putting some freeze-dried cheddar cheese. This is 3/4 cup of the cheddar cheese. I am going to use my funnel to get that down in there. And now I can just kind of twist this top loosely together. I could fold it over also if I wanted to because it is a fold top bag. Twist it loosely together and just like that. Now, if I wanted to keep this on my shelf for, probably longer than a year or so, I would want to add an oxygen absorber to this, probably about 100 cc's in a jar this size. But this is going to be all we need to make these biscuits, and I'll show you how easy this comes together. We're going to start by removing the bag of cheese, and we want to get this rehydrated, so I'm just going to add a little bit of cold water. It can actually be done right in this bag, or you could put it into a bowl or a container with a lid that you could shake it around in, is really handy. You could always put these two in 2 separate smaller jars, and then you'd have the jar to actually refresh the cheese right inside of, put the water right in there and shake it around. But I did this in 1 jar. You can do it any way you want. For this amount of cheese, it's only going to take about 2 tablespoons of cold water. You want to make sure it's cold water. You always want to refresh cheese with cold water. Hot water will not turn out well. Lots of people have found that out the hard way. So just tumble it around with the cold water. And we're going to let this set for, 20 minutes or so, half an hour. And you can put it in the fridge if it's going to be longer, but if it's just going to be that amount of time, it can totally set out. You can always check it after a little bit, and if it's doesn't seem like it got enough moisture, you could drizzle a tiny bit more water in. But that's really as simple as it is to bring this back to basically fresh cheese. So I'm going to set this aside and then get started on the biscuits. All right, now my cheese has been rehydrating for a little bit, so I think it's going to be done really soon. So I'm going to go ahead and start on the biscuit dough itself, which some of that cheese is going to go into this. So We want to make sure the cheese is ready first. I'm going to dump my rest of my ingredients out of the jar and into my bowl, my mixing bowl. And I'm just going to start by whisking this around just to make sure I break up any clumps of anything and get all those seasonings distributed throughout the mix. The pepper is giving me a good indication. I see the pepper bits spreading evenly because you can really see those. Now I'm just going to add my cold water. So once again, I'm using cold water. And this is going to only take about 6 tablespoons of cold water, which is about 1/4 cup plus 1/8 of a cup if you need to measure that way. But I like to use a little measuring cup that makes it easy to measure small amounts. So that's 4 tablespoons. I'm going to put in 2 more. I do have a little extra cold water here in case I feel like I need it, but I don't think I will. All right, so I'm just going to start mixing this around and getting this incorporated, and it'll probably seem at first like it's not going to be enough water, but if you keep going, it usually ends up being more than you think. I think it's because this mix uses different flours like coconut flour and garbanzo bean flour, I think. And so they need a little bit of time to hydrate. So that is looking pretty good. I'm just going to break up any clumps that I see. It smells good. Break up any big clumps that I see. And now I'm going to go get my cheese because I'm going to be putting about 1/2 cup of that cheese in here. This is a small batch of biscuits. This only makes about 5 with the size scoop that I'm using. I thought that was just about perfect. You could use a slightly smaller scoop or, a spoon or something, make them slightly smaller and get more biscuits. But I thought these are really good when they're freshly baked. So I thought it was better to make smaller batches at a time. Of course, you could always double it and make a bigger batch if you wanted. All right, so I've got my cheese here. I'm going to go ahead and measure out about 1/2 cup of this to put into the batter. We do want this to be quite a bit thicker than a pancake batter, but it's going to be kind of like a shaggy, wet batter is what we're going for. All right, so I've got my 1/2 cup of cheese here, and I'm setting the rest of that aside because I'm going to be sprinkling it over the top. So I'm just going to incorporate this cheese into my dough. Once again, if I see a clump, I can work it out, a clump of mix, I can work it out against the side of my dish, my bowl. All right, so this is pretty well mixed. I'm going to be lining my pan with some parchment paper. That's pretty important. I just got a pretty small pan here. I'm actually using an old pizza pan because, like I said, it's only 5 biscuits. So this is the scoop that I'm using. I am not sure what size this is. I was looking all over it. It doesn't seem to be marked. I've had this forever. I'm not overfilling it. I'm just filling it, even, and just plopping those down on the baking sheet, leaving some space in between. If you have a little extra batter, you can divide it up amongst the different biscuits that you plop down. Or like I said, make them just a tad bit smaller and you could get a 6th biscuit out of this, which would probably be ideal. Now I'm just going to pat the top of these down a tiny bit with my fingers just to make them a little bit flatter. And now I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of that extra cheese on. All right, so there's my extra cheese. All right, so these are all ready to go in the oven just like this. If you wanted, you could sprinkle some extra seasoning on the top. Like, for instance, I'm going to try a little bit of this Mrs. Dash tomato, basil, and garlic. I just found this. I thought this sounded pretty interesting. It is salt-free. You wouldn't want to put a whole lot of salt on the top unless you cut down on the salt inside. I'm just going to put this on a couple because I haven't tried it yet. So I'm just going to try it on a couple of these and see if we like it. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these in the oven at 375. And they're going to bake for about 12 to 14 minutes. All right, so it's been 12 minutes and check these out. They are done. They are super duper hot, so I'm not going to get into them right this second. But in just a minute when they've cooled a little bit, I'm going to break one open and show you how beautiful they look inside. You can see the seasoning on these got a little bit toasty. All right, let's see one of these biscuits. See how nicely that came up off that parchment? It's tender and soft. Can you see that? Look at that cheese. Look at that cheese. These are best when they're hot out of the oven like this. So good. And low carb and high protein. And we actually upped the protein by adding the cheese also. So these are a winner in my book. The next meal in a bag is an amazing Marry Me Chicken Gnocchi soup. Marry Me Chicken is super popular and trendy right now. It's basically refers to a chicken dish with a creamy Parmesan and sun-dried tomato sauce. The idea behind the name is that it is so good, if you make it for someone, they're bound to want to marry you. It became a viral sensation, and now the basic concept is being made into all different kinds of dishes, including this soup, which sort of marries the viral Marry Me Chicken with Olive Garden's equally viral chicken gnocchi soup. The results are spectacular. Let's get started. All right, the ingredients I'm using for this soup are a 28-ounce can of Keystone chicken, and then I've got this can of Campbell's cheese soup. This is a Parmesan garlic with herbs. I don't know if this is new or not, but I have never worked with this before. I'm really excited to find this. I've got this 1 pound package of shelf-stable gnocchi, which is kind of like a mix between a pasta and a dumpling made out of potatoes. It's really, really tasty, really, really simple to use, and cooks really quickly. I've got a box of chicken broth here. This is a 32-ounce box of broth. I've got a little bag of sun-dried tomatoes that are julienne cut. This is a 3-ounce bag of sun-dried tomatoes. I've got this can of media crema, and then I've got 2 little 1/4 pint jars here with different ingredients here. So I've got this full of seasonings and seasoning ingredients, and this one is full of spinach to use at the end, and I will show you how I did these 2 jars. So what I've done for these jars is I've got 2 1/4 pint jars, which are little teeny jelly jars, because it's just the right size for what I need. Now you could use 1 1/2 pint jar and just put everything together. I just kept it separate because it's 2 separate steps in the recipe just to avoid confusion, but it would totally work to do it the other way. So the first jar, I'm putting some seasoning items. So I'm going to be using some freeze-dried mirepoix, which mirepoix is a blend of carrot, celery, and onion. That's a very commonly used seasoning blend for starting off a recipe, especially with a soup like this. I love using mirepoix. I use it all the time, and it's really nice to have just a container like this of mirepoix next to your stove so that you can just sprinkle some in anytime you're starting a recipe and you don't have these ingredients on hand fresh. I'm just filling up this jar because this holds about a 1/2 cup, and that's how much I want, so I'm not really measuring. I'm just filling the jar. And I'm just adding a few more seasonings right on top, and they're going to filter down into the mirepoix. I'm adding some Italian seasoning. I'm going to be doing a teaspoon of that. So there's a teaspoon of the Italian seasoning. Next, I'm going to be using this garlic butter seasoning. You can use any kind of multi-purpose, garlic seasoning or garlic and herb seasoning, anything like that. Garlic and herb would be really good in here. I'm doing a teaspoon of this. This does have salt in it. It's a salty seasoning. And so if you use like a salt-free seasoning, you either would want to add a little bit of salt, or you're going to have a less salty dish, which may be what you need. And then I'm also adding a teaspoon of tomato powder. Give that a tap just to settle those down. And I'm also going to add a tablespoon of freeze-dried minced garlic. And now this jar is ready to go. If you are going to be keeping a meal like this on your shelf for longer than a year or so, you might want to add a very small oxygen absorber to this or vacuum seal it. But there's some other ingredients in this meal that are going to make us probably want to use it up within a year or so. So I think these are fine just like they are. So there's our first jar. And then for the second jar, I've just got 1 ingredient, and that is freeze-dried spinach. So this is going to go in at the very end of the cooking time. And once again, I'm just going to fill this jar. I'm not really measuring, but the jar is going to hold about the exact amount that I want for my recipe. This is almost gone because I absolutely love this freeze-dried spinach. It's so easy to just sprinkle into just about anything you're cooking and add some nutrition. But when I'm making like one of these Marry Me or Tuscan dishes that calls for spinach at the end, my family much prefers it when I use this freeze-dried spinach rather than fresh. They just like the texture better. They like the taste better. They like the way it comes out better. So, and it's easier for me because I don't have to worry about buying fresh spinach right at the last minute when I really need it, because otherwise it'll go bad. So these 2 ingredients are really awesome to have in your kitchen. If you don't have either one of these and you can't get your hands on them, although I will put a link down below if you want to grab them. But if you don't have these, you could leave them out. You could leave out the mirepoix and put just the seasonings into a little pouch or a little baby food jar. The spinach, it really kind of needs the spinach, but you could try using a small can of spinach. If you don't have the freeze-dried, I would just drain it really well, because the liquid in a can of spinach is kind of dark and gross looking, and so I think it could affect the aesthetics of the dish. All right, so now these 2 jars are ready to go. Like I mentioned, you could put these into one jar. You could put them into a small Mylar bag. You want something that's going to protect them over time from, air and moisture and things like that. So something besides a Ziploc, unless you're going to be using this recipe within a couple of months probably. All right, now let's get all these ingredients in the bag. All right, I've got my box of broth, my can of chicken, my can of soup, my can of media crema, my bag of gnocchi, my can of mirepoix and seasoning vegetables, my can of spinach, and my bag of sun-dried tomatoes. And now this bag is all ready for the shelf. All right, to get started on this soup, I've got my soup pot, and I'm going to be starting with the can of chicken, but we're going to do this one a little bit differently. So I'm going to open the can of chicken. And I am actually going to take out this fat that's in the can, a little bit of fat, and put it right into the pan because we're going to use this for a saute, just like you would with butter. This can actually doesn't have very much fat, but this will be enough. All right, so I'm going to turn my heat on and just start this fat melting. And then as soon as that gets started melting, I'm going to put in my seasoning jar and my sun-dried tomatoes and just give them a little bit of a saute. All right, so I'm going in with my seasonings and my seasoning vegetables and my sun-dried tomatoes. And I'm just going to get these toasted up just a little bit before we add the other ingredients. Oh, you can imagine how good this smells. All right, now that this has gotten nice and toasted and aromatic, I'm going to go ahead and add some of my other ingredients. I'm going to add my can of chicken, including the broth, and just kind of break this down a little bit. Not too much. Remember, the chicken is going to continue to break apart as the soup simmers. And we can continue to break it up as we go. Look at all those flavors. Now I'm going to add my can of soup. Here it is. It smells delish. I'm also going to use my favorite can scraping spatula to get all the rest of the soup out of there. Start getting this stirred around a little bit so this can start melting in and dissolving. Break that chicken up a little bit more to make it easier to stir. Now I'm going to add my box of chicken broth, the whole thing. I'm going to go ahead and raise the heat because I do want this to come up to a simmer now. I'm going to add a lid to this so it can simmer a little bit more quickly and preserve our fuel and our heat. All right, you can see this is just starting to come to a simmer. So I'm going to lower the heat. I'm just going to let this simmer for about 5 minutes. We just need to make sure that our sun-dried tomatoes and all of our vegetables are going to be fully rehydrated and tender enough to eat. The gnocchi is going to cook in here, but the gnocchi only takes about 3 minutes or so to cook. So I'm going to give this 5 more minutes of simmering before I add the gnocchi just to make sure that it has enough cook time, but this is going to come together super quickly. All right, now that it's been simmering for 5 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and add the gnocchi. So I've just cut open this package and I'm going to go ahead and get it all in there and give it a stir. And then I want to get this back up to a boil, and I'm just going to simmer this for about 3 minutes until it starts to all float on the top. And that's when you know your gnocchi is done. All right, at this point, I'm not even going to set a timer. I'm just going to kind of watch until I can see that the gnocchi are fully cooked. Like I said, they should float to the top. All right, so it's been probably about 3 minutes. You can see that the gnocchi are floating. They've absorbed a lot of the liquid. I think that we're ready to move on to the next step. So I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit so that it can just stay at a gentle simmer. And I'm going to go ahead and add my final ingredients. So I'm going to add my media crema. This always says shake well before opening. And I'm going to go ahead and stir this in. Our soup's all nice and creamy, and this is all melted in. That's looking pretty good. So now the final thing I need to add is my spinach. This really just needs to become moistened and become sort of incorporated into the soup. And then this is going to be all ready to serve. So I'm just going to keep this at a gentle simmer for just another couple of minutes. Let this all become incorporated. Let the flavors blend together. Make sure all of that media crema is all melted in, and it'll be ready to serve. All right, I think that's been simmering for about 1 minute, and that's really all it needs. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, and I'm just going to let this set off the heat just to cool down, and it's much too hot to eat right now, so I'll give it about 5 to 10 minutes off the heat, and then it's going to be ready to serve. Look at how beautiful that looks. It smells amazing. Thick, hearty soup that's going to fill you right up and warm you from the inside out. All right, this has had a little time to cool off, just a little. We still want it to be nice and hot. But look at this beautiful, amazing soup. Look at that. I can't wait to dig in and taste this. Wow, this is delicious. It tastes every bit as good as it looks, or maybe even better. Next up, I'm making a buffalo chicken chili. In my book, I include chilies in the same category as soups. It's always soup, stews, and chilies for me. And this is definitely a soup-like chili. Even if you're not a buffalo chicken fan, you might like this chili, but whatever you do, don't tune out now because my last soup coming up right after this one is Mr. Wicked Prepared's favorite out of all of them. But first, the buffalo chicken chili. All right, so for this recipe, I've got another 28-ounce can of Keystone chicken. I have got a can of Great Northern beans here. Any white bean would work. I've got a can of fire roasted diced tomatoes. You could also use plain diced tomatoes. You could use also petite diced tomatoes, which is sometimes something I like to do so my kids don't notice the chunks as much, but the fire roasted is nice in this. I wouldn't use any other flavor like the Italian seasoned one. I don't think would go well in this recipe. I've got a can of corn here. Now this is the Southwest corn, so it's got a little bit of seasoning, a little bit of diced up peppers in there as well, so it's going to add a little extra to this. If you don't have this, you can't find this, you can use any corn. You can use plain corn, you could use a Mexicorn, any canned corn. I've got a can of media crema here. This is a great ingredient. You can see I use it a lot. And I've got a packet of ranch dressing mix here. I've also got 2 small bottles of this buffalo sauce. So you want some buffalo sauce for this recipe. You want to use a buffalo sauce that you like the flavor of, and you also need something that you can find in a small enough container. You're going to want about a 1/4 cup up to a 1/2 cup of sauce, depending on your personal preference. So part of the beauty of these recipes is not only that we have everything in one bag, but also that we don't have leftover partial containers of food that we need to put away and refrigerate. So I try to use the appropriate size containers. You could do something like cups like this that you get from the deli, or even fast food restaurants sometimes have those, maybe pizza places, any place that sells chicken strips. If you like buffalo sauce a lot, you could add a regular size bottle. This is a 12-ounce bottle of the same sauce. You could add a small bottle of whatever sauce you like, knowing that you're probably going to use a little bit on the heavier side, more close to a 1/2 cup, and that people might use some sauce to drizzle over the top when they're finished. I was thinking that this would probably say somewhere on here, refrigerate after opening, but I looked all over and I do not see anywhere on this bottle that it says refrigerate after opening. To be honest, even if this did say refrigerate after opening, at my house we never have a lot of fridge space, so things like this tend to sit out anyways. So that's up to you what sauce you want to use in your bag. And then the other thing that I have here are a couple of toppings. So I've got a little bag of tortilla strips that are like a salad and soup topping that they sell just for that purpose. You could also put a small bag of Fritos. We like Fritos on our chili, or a small, some of the individual serving size bags. And then I've also got here a little cup, and this is freeze-dried blue cheese crumbles. This is a great addition to crumble and sprinkle over the top of your chili. If you don't like blue cheese, or you don't want to have to get any freeze-dried blue cheese, you can just leave this ingredient out. I really like blue cheese, and I love having access to a lot of ingredients, so I really enjoy having freeze-dried blue cheese on hand. It's also handy for camping trips and things like that. I like some blue cheese on my steaks, so if we're grilling steaks when we're camping, this is something I can bring along that I don't have to worry about keeping in the cooler and having it go bad. All right, let's get these ingredients into the bag. I'm going to add my chicken, beans, I'm going to add my corn, diced tomatoes, media crema, tortilla strips. I'm going to add my blue cheese crumbles, and I'm going to add my ranch dressing mix. And now this bag is all ready to go on the shelf. But I'm going to fix it up for you right now and show you how this comes out. This is going to probably be the easiest meal yet, because we are literally going to pretty much just dump everything together and just heat it all up. I'm going to start with the chicken. Once again, you can scoop as much or as little of the fat out as you want, but I am going to leave the broth in there. So I'm just going to dump the chicken and the broth right into the pot, and I'm just going to break the chicken up a little bit. just like our other chicken recipes. Had a lot of chicken in this video today. All right, next I'm going to add the tomatoes. I'm not going to drain the tomatoes. I pretty much never drain this kind of tomatoes anyways. I'm going to add the corn. I'm also not going to drain the corn. There's some good flavor in that and precious water that we don't want to lose, especially because I'm using this Southwest corn. There's a lot of flavor in there because there's some different seasonings in there. Now I'm going to add the beans. And I'm also not going to drain these beans. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't when I'm cooking, but in an emergency, I wouldn't want to have to not only waste that liquid, but use extra liquid probably to rinse the beans. So I'm just going to put it all in here. This liquid has some salt and some flavor. It's going to help thicken up our chili with its starchiness. And it's going to add a little bit of extra liquid. If you were making this on any average day and you did drain your beans and your corn, you may need to add a little bit of extra chicken broth to this, but with all this extra liquid in here, we are not going to need to add that. Now I'm going to add my ranch packet. You could use any brand of ranch dressing packet that you like. This I get at Save-A-Lot because it's pretty cheap. Walmart has their own brand. Of course, you could use Hidden Valley, or you could use a homemade ranch dressing mix if that's your preference. You just have to put it into some sort of a little small baby food jar or a little Mylar packet or something like that. Now we need our buffalo sauce, our buffalo wing sauce. Now how much you want to put is going to depend on your personal taste. Usually when I put a 1/4 cup, that usually ends up being enough for us. But you can add, depending on the sauce you use, that also might make a difference, how spicy or how strong your sauce is. I'm going to measure this just to see how much is in one of these little bottles. So it's about 3 tablespoons in one of those bottles. So it's not quite a 1/4 cup, and that's kind of what I expected. So I'm going to use this to make up to the 1/4 cup. And then after that, I can use what's left in this bottle for adjusting to taste. And also if there's anybody in the family who likes a little extra buffalo sauce, if there's any left in the bottle, they can use it to drizzle over the top of their bowl of chili. You also, of course, could include another extra bottle in there if you wanted to make sure you had plenty of extra. All right, so here's my 1/4 cup of buffalo sauce, which is a little bit less than 1.5 of those bottles. All right, let's give that a mix and see how buffalo-y that looks. It's looking pretty good and buffalo-y. And now, of course, I've got my media crema is the last thing that I need to add. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stir with this a little bit just to get the extra crema off of this spatula. And now that everything's in there, I'm going to go ahead and apply the heat. And we really just need to heat this up, get it simmering, keep it on a low simmer. We don't want anything to go haywire with our cream. And then as soon as it's all heated and the flavors are blended, then it'll be ready to eat. We can taste this as we go just to adjust the amount of buffalo sauce if we need it. I am going to use a lid just to keep the heat sort of contained so we don't waste any fuel. So I'll just use a lid and take it off and stir every once in a while as I need to. I don't know if I'm the only one who does this, but I will sometimes save one of my dirty cans right next to where I'm cooking to use as a spoon rest. And that's especially handy if it's an emergency and you don't want to have something else dirty that you're going to have to clean. All right, you can kind of see that this is starting to come up to a simmer, and we do want to keep it on a really low simmer. I'm going to go ahead and stir it, and I'm going to turn it down in just a minute. I actually brought this up to the simmer pretty slowly because my can of butane was running out. It was getting empty, so the flame gets pretty low towards the end. So I just let it go so that I could bring it up to the temperature slowly so that it give the flavors a little bit more time to blend together without having to like boil it very long. So it was in the lower heating phases a lot longer. You can break up any chicken that you find, any bigger chunks that need to be broken up. I'm just going to put this really low and let this simmer for, 2-3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, really low at the most, really just 2 to 3 minutes, just to blend these flavors and make sure everything is all combined. It really doesn't need much at all. And I am going to keep the heat really low. All right, so this has been simmering ever so gently for 2 minutes. I think it was 2 minutes that I set that for. So now this is pretty much ready to go. I think this has plenty of buffalo flavor for our taste, or for my taste, but once again, we have the rest of this bottle that did not get into the soup that people can use to adjust to their personal preference, or if you know your family is going to want it a little bit more buffalo-y, a little bit more spicy, you could add the rest of this bottle and any other sauce that you had put in your bag. All right, so I'm turning the heat off. Just going to let this set for a few minutes and then it'll be ready to serve. All right, this has cooled off. Look at how delicious this looks. Let's give it a try. All right, here's our chili. Now let's just add a little bit of toppings. Got my tortilla strips and my blue cheese crumbles. Now look at how amazing this looks. I cannot wait to dig in. That is so good. This is not super spicy done this way. It has a little bit of buffalo flavor. It does not have like a really spicy flavor. So if you don't like spice, I think you could totally still eat this. Oh, so good. My final soup today is kind of mind-blowing because it's so simple. It's really just 5 ingredients and you could do it with 4. It's inexpensive to make, but it comes out truly so delicious. It blows my mind every time. It's a loaded potato soup. Let's get started and I'll show you how I make it. For this recipe, I'm starting with some instant mashed potatoes. Now these are the kind that are just add water. They're already seasoned. They already have their milk and butter. You just pour in 2 cups of water. So this is the regular size pack, not the family size pack. Once again, it will make a difference because you would get a much thicker product if you use too much potato. There are so many different flavor variations that you can use. I mean, these are just a few that I picked up at my Walmart just the other day. So you've got cheese and bacon, 4 cheese, cheddar and sour cream. There's all different sorts of flavors. I chose sour cream and chives this time, but you can mix it up by doing lots of different flavors. Then I've also got a can of diced potatoes because often if you were to make potato soup from like fresh potatoes or frozen diced potatoes, you would cook it all up and then you'd mash up your potatoes and you'd leave some chunks. So it would not be completely smooth. So this is going to give us the smooth part of the soup and the chunky part of the soup. And then I've also got a 32-ounce box of chicken broth here. So 4 cups of chicken broth. And then I've also got a 12-ounce can of evaporated milk right here. And then besides that, I've got a small bag of bacon bits. So these are shelf stable for a while. I've had these on my shelf for at least a year. So this meal should at least be able to last a year before you need to rotate it out or refresh your ingredients. This is a 2.5-ounce bag of bacon bits. It's the smallest one I can find at Walmart. And it's really perfect for a single recipe like this. I've used it in other recipes before. So this is a really good thing to have. If you're worried about the shelf life on that bacon, you could use some freeze-dried bacon that you could put into a small jar or a small Mylar bag with an oxygen absorber. And that way you wouldn't have to worry about it as much. If you sealed it up airtight and removed the oxygen, it would last for many, many years. And then you'd only have to worry about your potatoes. These will last for several years past their dates, but because of the butter and everything in them, dairy, they don't last as long as plain flakes, but they add a lot of flavor to the soup. The other thing I have here is totally optional. This is just a little Mylar bag and it's filled with some freeze-dried chives. It's just going to be for looks, for garnish at the end, and it's definitely totally optional. All right, let's get these ingredients into the bag. I'm going to start with my box of chicken broth and then my can of diced potatoes, my can of evaporated milk, my bag of mashed potatoes, my bag of bacon bits, and my little bag of chives. And now this bag is all ready to go on the shelf. I'm not going to put this one away though. Of course, I'm going to fix it up so you can see how it comes out. I've got my soup pot and this is going to be really, really quick and easy, super simple. I'm going to start by pouring my chicken broth into the pot. The whole thing, all 4 cups. I'm going to add my diced potatoes. Now, often when I'm doing emergency meals and I have canned vegetables and things, I will leave the water in and use it as part of the dish because you wouldn't want to waste it in a time that water might be a precious commodity. But with potatoes, because they do have this calcium chloride, which is a preservative, I guess, a firming agent it says, and I've looked it up and it may or may not be great for you to consume. So I do drain the water off of the potatoes. I'm going to go ahead and add my whole can of drained potatoes. And now I'm going to add my pouch of mashed potatoes. I'm going to go ahead and give that a stir. Remember, these potatoes will start to absorb the liquid and thicken this soup as we heat it up and as it sets. Now I'm going to go ahead and add my can of evaporated milk. All right, now I'm just going to put this on the heat and just bring it up to a simmer so it can heat and thicken, and then I'm going to add the bacon. I'm not going to add the bacon right now because I don't want it cooking in there for too terribly long. I can already feel this is starting to thicken up a little bit from the mashed potatoes, and it will continue to thicken as it heats. I'm not even probably going to put a lid on this because I'm going to be stirring this pretty frequently just to make sure that nothing scorches on the bottom. All right, I do see this kind of starting to simmer, so I'm going to turn it down a little bit. So you don't want it to come up to a rolling boil. I'm just going to let this simmer for about 5 minutes. All right, now it's been 5 minutes of simmering. You can see the soup has thickened up really nicely. So now I'm just going to put in the bacon, and we're just going to cook it just a tad bit longer and then get ready to eat. So I'm going to put in my bacon. I'm not going to put the entire bag just because I do want to leave a little teeny bit for garnishing each bowl. Be careful because there may be some sort of an oxygen absorber or something inside the bag, but there may not be. I'm not seeing one. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stir this in. That's most of the bag. I just left a tiny bit that I can use to garnish. Just let this go for a minute or two. You can see this has gotten nice and thick and creamy. You can see how many bacon bits I left in there. Not a whole lot. I probably could have left a little bit more, but you can also just dump them all in the soup. It really just depends on if you want to have any left to sprinkle on the top of the dish when you serve. This is part of the reason why I did not choose a bacon-flavored potato pouch, because I was putting bacon in, so I didn't want it to be too bacony. All right, that's simmered for about 1 minute. I'm going to turn this off, and once again, just let this cool off a little bit before I serve it. All right, let's go ahead and get this served up. It smells absolutely amazing. You can see how nice and thick and creamy it got. Absolutely amazing. Let's go ahead and put a little bit of these bacon bits on and a little bit of the chives and get ready to dig in. I am so ready to dig into this. It looks and smells amazing. All right, let's give it a try. Oh, that is so good. You know, for such a simple and inexpensive and easy meal, I am always surprised at how well this turns out. This would be a great struggle meal because it's very inexpensive to make, and you could make it even less expensive if you used a bacon flavor potato mix and just left the bag of bacon bits out, or just forget about the bacon entirely and use any flavor potato you want. I used a name brand potato today, but they do make great value and other store brands that are even less expensive than the name brand, and I use those all the time. They work just great. Now you have 4 more meal in a bag recipes for your pantry. I hope you're going to love these as much as we do, and I really think you will. I always recommend trying the recipe once and testing it out to make sure your family likes it, and if you do, you can make up several bags to put away. I have a whole playlist with many recipes just like these, so you could have months worth of easy meals to get you by no matter what happens. They're great for emergencies when you're stressed and under pressure. Trust me, you're not going to want to think about gathering ingredients and creating meals from scratch, but you're also going to get sick of SpaghettiOs, canned chili, and MREs pretty quickly. But they're not just for emergencies. If you had a crazy day and you don't have time to think about supper, maybe you get home and you realize that you never plugged your crock pot in, or you never took your meat out to thaw from the freezer. Maybe you're running late. You need to ask your spouse or your teen to fix supper. These are easy. So if they're not that great in the kitchen, this is going to help them out. If you lose your job, or maybe you have an unexpected expense come up, maybe an illness that you're not expecting and you can't get groceries for some period of time, you've got complete meals at the ready. If someone has a baby or falls ill and you just want to help them out with a meal that they can make at their convenience, these are great to grab. Many people also make these up to donate to food pantries and blessing boxes. There's so many uses for these meals in bags. Check out our whole list and drop any other ideas that you have down below. I have a Facebook group for my meals in a jar, but we also do meals in bags over there, so come join us. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a jack-o'-lantern down in the comments, and I'm going to put that meal in a bag playlist right up here for you to check out next. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.